I've created some of my best work with a fever, which is either a romantic artist cliche or a clue that creativity is a signal. And signals don't disappear. They do, however, get blocked. And once you can name what's blocking it, the channel reopens fast. So often I hear people say, "Yeah, I've lost my creativity," the same way they would say, "I don't sleep well anymore." It rarely comes with drama, it just arrives like a weather report, a resignation, as if the person is simply describing a new climate they now live under. And I always take that sentence somewhat seriously. I also refuse to accept what it's implying. Because when people say they've lost creativity, what they usually mean is that they can't hear it, they can't see it, they can't feel it move through them. And from my perspective, creativity is always present. It just may be buried and feel like it was never there. So the real question becomes, what makes it readable again? See, it's a lot like the difference between the music stopping and the room getting so cluttered you can't hear it anymore. You walk in, you listen, you feel nothing, and the mind does what minds do. It reaches for the simplest explanation. Right? I'm not creative, or I'm no longer creative. But absence is almost never the real story. It's more about obstruction. Something is sitting between you and what's already there. That's why I love this line, because it explains more than 1,000 motivational speeches ever could. The signal stays, it's the receiver that varies. That one line explains 90% of the creative blocks. That line is the whole model I work from. It's the premise the channel rests on. We are souls having a human experience. And from that premise, creativity becomes an incarnational function, not a personality trait. The soul remains coherent always. The body interface changes. Life happens. Inputs accumulate. Pressure builds. Timing gets messy. The receiver gets crowded. And once you see it that way, creativity stops being a mystery. It stops being a genetic lottery or a personality trait or a special badge you were either blessed with or you didn't. Creativity becomes what it actually is, the soul translating itself into time, matter, and relationship. And this applies to all the arts, and even to something as simple as a sentence that can shift a conversation, or the meal you make for someone where the care is felt without being explained, or a solution that arrives with that unnerving cleanliness. That the kind that makes you look around like, oh, where did that come from? Because it didn't come from effort the way effort wants to take credit for it. It just came through. So I feel creativity belongs to incarnation, not to a category of people who put creative in their bio. Incarnation is the soul taking shape. Creativity is one of the most ordinary signs that this shaping is already happening. That's why the sentence that changes the entire frame is simple. You don't create to become yourself. You create because you already are. And that's where the channel either opens or turns into a courtroom. Because when you create to become yourself, the act becomes a trial. Something is now placed on the line, either worth, identity, credibility, proof. And as soon as something's on the line, the party that manages identity gets involved. The ego shows up right there, exactly where it always shows up, at the edge of exposure. So I don't treat ego like a villain, I treat it like a function. It's an identity manager. It manages belonging, it manages reputation, it manages risk, and it just wants safety, and it wants to look competent while it achieves it. And it's very good at its job. And the moment it's running the session, the creative act quietly shifts. So the first question becomes, how will this be perceived? And the moment perception becomes the job, truth stops being the source. The second question then becomes, how do I avoid looking foolish? Which leads into the third question, what will this mean about me? Meanwhile, the real question, the only question that keeps the channel open, gets pushed to the side. And that's, what is true? So that single swap is enough to distort the signal. The work becomes tighter, more controlled, more performative. And sometimes it becomes blank. Sometimes it just gets busy. Either way, the life leaves the room. So the real question is never, where did my creativity go? The real question is, what narrowed the channel? And I learned this in the most annoying way possible, because to me it made the process so obvious. Some of my most successful images were created when I had a high fever. And it was a proper fever, sweating, nauseous, the body was running so hot. I actually had to lie down between every shot, and in the process my mind was slightly offline, the kind where you don't have enough energy left for personality. And at the time, it felt like a strange gift. Later, I realized it was simply a clean experiment. See, the fever didn't make me creative, it made me unavailable for ego management. I wasn't auditioning, posturing, or checking myself every 12 seconds. I didn't have the bandwidth to curate. The mind was quieter, and the channel opened. The soul came through. The work arrived with a cleanliness that felt almost surreal. I don't recommend illness as a method. I recommend seeing the information it implies, because information is what gets you out of the belief into mechanics. Creativity didn't increase because I tried harder. Creativity increased because interference fell away, dropped. And that's when something clicked for me. Effort can be noble and still be noisy. And the body always knows when effort has crossed into interference. Trying can be sincere and still distort the channel. What changes the work fastest is the noise floor. These days when I create spirit fractals, the mind still arrives with opinions. Yet doubt shows up, imposter commentary shows up, the internal board meetings begin. This won't work. Nothing will appear. They'll hate it. It's blunt. It's fake. And it's almost never true. I don't wrestle with it anymore. I don't try to heal it mid-session. I don't argue with it as if the argument will suddenly produce art. I simply relocate it. The monkey mind can pace in the back room. It can hold its clipboard and it can mutter all at once. It can draft emails, but it doesn't get the pen. And once it's off the console, something begins to enter that I could not have planned. It arrives with its own intelligence. It arrives with timing. It arrives with the kind of internal ease that doesn't need my approval. And every single time I finish, I'm left in awe. Not because I got lucky, but because I got out of the way enough for what was already present to become legible. And over the last 20 years, I've watched the interference take really three main forms. And they show up as different stories, but the process stays consistent. And the first is performance pressure. It begins as standards. It starts as caring, as the desire for the work to have an impact. But at some point that crosses a line and becomes proof. The work all of a sudden asks to prove something. Prove I still have it. Prove I'm real. Prove it wasn't a fluke, or I'm important. And my body always announces it by my breath starting to tighten, or my eyes will just get braced, my chest narrows and gets heavy, and my system starts to lean towards control. And that tightening is the channel narrowing in real time. See, performance lives in the future, while creativity lives in the now, the present. And when I try to guarantee the ending, I lose contact with the present, the beginning. And I become divided, one part attempting creation, another part attempting reputation management. And that division distorts the channel. And this leads into the second contamination, which I used to confuse contamination for information, but it's actually atmosphere. Right? Comparison, outrage, cynicism, speed, the constant posture of checking, a nervous system trained on constant more, will struggle to hold a subtle signal. Creativity needs inner room, a space where something can manifest without being immediately measured, optimized, explained, or dismissed. It's actually the inputs that tune the instrument. And that part I missed for a long time. See, inputs don't just tell you what's happening. They shape what you're capable of hearing. And whatever you've tuned to is what you tend to create from. And then the third is unfinished business. And this is the one that changes everything once you get to understand it. Sometimes creativity stalls because something in your life is literally incomplete. A truth that wants to be spoken, a decision that you postponed, or a boundary that wants to be held, a grief that wants to be acknowledged. Unfinished things leak energy or current quietly, but persistently. Creative current is still current, and it wants to return to the leak until the system becomes reliable again. Now, this is where the soul first model becomes practical, because the soul keeps pressurizing the same location in your life until the shape completes. The pressure isn't punishment, it's orientation. It's the intelligence that wants the wholeness, because wholeness makes the channel stable. And once I see these three disruptions clearly, I stop treating creativity like something I have to force. I start treating it like something I nurture or steward. See, I'm not the owner of creativity, I'm hosting it. And hosting comes with rules, and the rules are simple. Protect the channel, lower interference, and finish what's unfinished. Basically, protecting the channel means I stop blending creation space with consumption space. Scrolling trains reaction. Creating trains reception. If I create on the same nervous system I'm scrolling on, the channel just floods. So I give the soul a clean room to enter. And sometimes that's a literal room. Sometimes it's a ritual. Sometimes it's a boundary that says creation first, inputs later. As an example, when I create my spirit fractals, I follow the same ritual every single time. I always start with my Tibetan singing bowl, and I'll sit in the frequency that it creates, and I'll stay there until I just get an inner sense of completion. And then I'll open with my intention prayer and set the boundaries and set the parameters or the ask, and then I release it. And that starts the session. And this helps my body-mind lower any internal interference. Lowering interference means basic calibration. There are many ways to do this, and it can be as simple as, a longer exhale than inhale. Movement, dance movement that clears charge. Less threat feed, less speed. This isn't self-improvement as identity, it's just signal hygiene. It's stepping outside for 30 seconds so the voice becomes audible again. Finishing what's unfinished means one clean act of coherence, one completion step, one truth, one boundary, one decision. Something that tells your system and the field around your system that you are reliable as an instrument. Because when the receiver clears, the soul doesn't become creative, the soul becomes legible. So here's a 24-hour experiment that you can try that's simple, clean, and realistic. For the next 24 hours, keep comparison inputs out of your system until you've created. No feeds before noon, no trend checking, no scanning other people's lives to decide whether your signal is valid. You can do that later if you want. Just don't do it first. Then give yourself one clean hour of clean making. You're not building a masterpiece. You're reopening contact. Write badly, sketch badly, move shapes and sentences. Let the doorway be messy. See, most people never get their channel back because they demand dignity right at the entrance. Then take one completion act. Ask yourself, what unfinished thing is siphoning current? Then do the smallest step you can do today. A message, a sentence, a text, a decision, a boundary, a file finished, just even a shelf cleared. Something that closes the loop and returns energy to the system. Then track 3 simple data points. Notice whether contact returned. Even if the output stayed rough, notice whether your timing shifted, whether you felt pulled earlier or more naturally. Notice whether energy returned after the completion act, as if the system stopped leaking. Because when current stops leaking, it returns. And when it returns, creativity doesn't need to be summoned, it just arrives. Creativity is a soul entering form. You're not manufacturing something from nothing, you're translating something that is already present. The signal stays. The question is whether the interface is clear enough to let it pass. Run the experiment and tell me what changed. Contact, resistance, energy return, nothing. Nothing's helpful as well. Because this isn't belief, it's signal, and the signal stays. Thank you.